"Your approach is too old school for where we're headed," he said, not even looking me in the eye. "We need digital-first leadership." He was wrong, and I knew it the second he spoke. My name is Lyle. I'm 52 years old, and until last Thursday, I was the regional sales director for one of the largest print media groups in the Midwest. 17 years of my life, gone with a 14-minute meeting and a laminated HR checklist. No warning. No thank you. Just a script read by someone half my age, with no idea how many Saturdays I missed with my daughter to be on client calls. How many deals I closed from hospital waiting rooms. They said my methods were outdated, that I was too set in my ways. I didn't argue. I just nodded, shook hands, and started packing the little office I'd turned into a second home. There was the mug my son made me when he was in 4th grade, the signed photo of our first major client, and that old Rolodex I never got rid of, not because I'm a dinosaur, but because the people in it still answer my calls. The truth, I saw it coming. You always do, eventually. The subtle signs. First, they moved my assistant to a more collaborative department. Then my name stopped showing up on the Monday briefing emails. My parking spot got reassigned. I wasn't surprised when they said we need someone who speaks Gen Z. What did sting was that they said it like I'd never brought value, like I hadn't built half of the revenue pipelines they were still riding on. Back in 2006, I was hired when this company was hanging by a thread. They needed someone who understood relationships, not just data. I knew how to walk into a room full of skeptical buyers and walk out with trust. I knew how to spot the deal that wasn't on the spreadsheet, but was sitting between the lines of a conversation. They called that intuition. Now they call it irrelevant. What nobody at that table knew, not the VP who called me sir with a forced smile, or the fresh-faced consultant who couldn't pronounce half our client names, was that every major account we ever landed came from my personal credibility, not the brand, not the tech stack. Me. They thought letting me go would streamline operations, but what they actually did was unplug their power source, and I wasn't going to tell them that. When I first joined the company, we were 6 people crammed into a rented space above a bike repair shop. The fax machine jammed twice a day, and the biggest client on our books was worth $12,000 annually. No one wanted to sell in that industry back then. Too much work, not enough flash. But I didn't care. I didn't need flash. What I needed was a place to prove myself. And I did. I spent the first 2 years driving across 3 states in my old Honda Accord, shaking hands and taking notes. I knew every client's anniversary, their kids' names, even the name of the office dog. Those details, they mattered. They still do. Slowly, the numbers started to change. Clients stayed. New ones came in through referrals. We opened our first satellite office in St. Louis, then Denver. The company grew, but no one on the board ever really asked how. They just saw the line go up. And in every quarterly meeting, when they toasted the strategic vision, I sat in the back with a quiet smile, knowing I'd earned every inch of that growth, with zero help from slide decks or flashy tech demos. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing about being phased out. They don't announce it. They just start erasing you in pieces. The first time I felt it was during the quarterly strategy session. For the first time in a decade, I wasn't on the agenda. No updates, no client retention metrics, just a passing thanks to the legacy team before they dove into market automation and TikTok outreach. Then came the intern hires. Bright kids, don't get me wrong, polished resumes, big ideas, but none of them had ever sat across from a furious client in a small-town diner, trying to save a deal over burnt coffee and trust issues. They were being mentored by someone who learned sales from a podcast. I got a new manager. Younger. MBA. He introduced himself by saying, "I'm here to modernize the department." Translation, I was the first domino. My travel budget got reallocated. The CRM system changed, and I wasn't given access for 2 weeks. I found out about major client changes from LinkedIn, not my team. And when I asked about it in a meeting, he smiled and said, "We're trying to decentralize things a bit." They stopped inviting me to client dinners. My calls started going unanswered. When I'd walk into the office, people smiled politely, like I was the retired guy who kept showing up out of habit. But the worst part? It wasn't the cold shoulder. It was the fake praise. The way they'd call me a pillar of the company in front of the team, just before passing my accounts to someone else. Like they were writing the eulogy before the funeral. I didn't say a word, not yet. I just watched and remembered every name they were handing off to people who didn't even know how we'd earned them. The first time they called me after I was gone, I didn't answer. It was 4 days after the termination. A Friday. They had just reassigned one of my oldest clients to a junior rep. Someone sharp, sure, but still green enough to think rapport came from email templates and emoji follow-ups. The client wasn't happy. Apparently the call didn't go well, so they tried calling me. I let it ring. Then came the email. Quick consult if you're available. Just a few questions on the legacy accounts. I archived it. No reply. No emotion. Because, here's the truth. I wasn't fired. I was released. Freed. And I wasn't about to help them clean up a mess they created with arrogance and short-term vision. What they didn't know was that I had quietly maintained a private spreadsheet for years. A simple document. Client contacts, notes, histories, pain points, and most importantly, trust indicators. Which clients were loyal to the company, and which ones were loyal to me. It was never revenge. Not at first. It was just clarity. They replaced experience with efficiency. They bet on systems over people. But what they never understood was, people are the system. And now they were fumbling in the dark without the one person who knew where the wires ran. And I was just getting started. 2 weeks after the silence, I got a LinkedIn message that stopped me mid-sip of coffee. Hey, Lyle. Heard you're a free agent. Let's talk. It was from Melissa, CEO of a boutique consulting firm I'd worked with years ago when she was still climbing the ranks at a client company. Back then, we pulled off a last-minute fulfillment job that saved her division from losing $1 million contract. She never forgot. Apparently, neither did her board. We set a meeting for the following Monday, over bourbon, not spreadsheets. She didn't waste time. I need someone who knows people, not pipelines. I want trust, not traction metrics. We're expanding into 5 new territories, and I need you to build the bridge before I even start paving the road. She didn't mention salary. She just slid the offer across the table with a confidence that said, I know exactly what you're worth. It wasn't just better than my old job. It was everything I had built for them, now offered back to me with autonomy and respect. I didn't say yes right away. Not out of hesitation, but strategy. That same week, my old company reached out again. This time it was someone higher up, someone who hadn't spoken to me directly in over a year. Just wondering if you'd be open to a short-term consulting arrangement. We've been experiencing some transitional turbulence. So the boat was rocking. I responded with one sentence. I'm currently reviewing several aligned opportunities and wish you all the best with your new direction. I could almost hear the panic through the typing bubbles. Meanwhile, calls from clients, my clients, started pouring in. Hey Lyle, are you still with them? Do you have bandwidth to take on some advisory work? Please tell me you're starting something new. The final straw came when one of their biggest clients, who, by the way, once told me I was the only reason they hadn't jumped ship years ago, sent a formal request to terminate their contract. And in the exit interview, they said 6 words that landed like a brick. We work with people, not companies. I never once asked anyone to leave with me. I didn't send a single message. But they followed. Not out of loyalty to a title, but because they remembered who picked up the phone at 11 p.m., who delivered when the warehouse flooded, who showed up. Melissa's offer was still on the table. But now it was more than a new job. It was a new chapter, with the leverage of someone who left quietly and took the foundation with him. And the part they still didn't understand, I hadn't even used what I had saved. Yet. The unraveling didn't take long. 2 of their regional leads resigned in the same week. One left without notice. The other left with a memo, an internal bomb that listed every missed opportunity, mismanaged account, and warning ignored. I didn't write it, but I could have. The CRM system crashed for 3 days straight. Turns out no one on the new team knew how to properly sync the legacy database with the new SaaS overlay they bragged about in the last investor call. Clients were furious. Orders were delayed. Refunds piled up. Then came the legal letters. One of the company's oldest partners threatened breach of contract over failure to maintain service-level agreements. The funny thing? That clause was one I personally added to the agreement 12 years ago to protect them. And now, it was the blade they were falling on. They reached out again, this time with urgency. Polite masks off. We would appreciate your expertise in a formal capacity. Please advise what kind of compensation structure you'd be open to. I didn't reply. So they escalated. Their head of legal, someone I hadn't spoken to in 5 years, sent a notice alleging breach of non-compete, claiming I was actively soliciting clients while still under contract. I laughed, because first of all, I wasn't under contract. They had terminated me without cause, remember? And second, every client who left on their own. I hadn't reached out to anyone, but I did keep the emails, the call logs, the timelines. My lawyer, an old friend who owed me a favor from back in the day, responded on my behalf with surgical precision. He attached a copy of the termination letter, the outdated non-compete clause that had expired with the last restructure, and 3 examples of clients who documented their own reasons for leaving. The company went quiet after that. From what I heard through the grapevine, board members started asking questions. Internal investigations launched. The CTO resigned suddenly. Some say it was health reasons. Others say it had to do with a deleted server log. All I know is, the tower they built on short-term thinking, ego, and flash collapsed from the inside, and I didn't have to lift a finger, just let the truth do its job. It started with a whisper from someone I trained. Check your old email logs, something's off. I didn't want to believe it at first. I had chalked everything up to classic corporate politics, new leadership, new vision, and the usual clearing of seasoned professionals who didn't fit the PowerPoint version of success. But this was calculated. Buried in the forwarded emails was a thread, a back and forth between 2 senior executives and a third name I didn't recognize at first. A consultant, brought in quietly months before my dismissal. The messages were casual, almost smug. If we move him out by Q2, the transition will be smoother. He's got too much client influence, it's a liability. We can get 2 juniors and a CRM solution for less than his package. And there it was. They didn't fire me for being too traditional. They eliminated me because I was the system. And that made them uncomfortable. They didn't want to compete with my results. They wanted to erase them and take credit for the fallout. But it didn't stop there. One of the junior hires reached out to me, off the record. We had worked together briefly during onboarding. Sharp kid. Good. Instincts. He sounded shaken. They told us not to contact you, but something doesn't sit right. They're pushing us to use your old contacts, but half of them are stonewalling. It's like they know. They did know. What none of the execs realized was that in trying to erase me, they had left a digital trail, meeting invites, emails with contradicting justifications, internal performance reviews that painted me as integral, right up until the month they let me go. I sent it all to my attorney. We didn't sue. We didn't need to. The board had already started to dig. A week later, I got a call from someone I hadn't heard from in years. Former COO. Retired now, but still plugged in. His voice was low. Lyle, they're in free fall. The board is livid. Investors pulled out of the new product rollout. Apparently, some whistleblower sent them a packet of internal memos detailing how leadership misrepresented projections and tried to cover it by cutting key staff. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. He continued. They tried to blame it on you, said you withheld knowledge. But the clients, they're defending you, publicly, internally. One of them even sent a letter to the board saying, "You fired the soul of the operation." That line hit me harder than I expected, because I hadn't asked for this. I didn't orchestrate the collapse. All I did was walk away and let the facade crumble under its own weight. I thought about all those nights I second-guessed myself, all the moments I stayed silent in meetings, wondering if maybe I was obsolete. That maybe I was the problem. Turns out I was never the problem. I was the last thing holding it together. And the moment I walked out that door, they found out what happens when the foundation disappears. I didn't rush into anything. That was the old way, jumping to fix, to prove myself, to hold things up that weren't mine to carry. This time, I built different. Melissa's offer was still on the table, but now it wasn't about getting back in the game. It was about building, something that couldn't be stolen, something that didn't need board approval to do the right thing. We structured it together, a consulting wing, lean and agile, with me at the helm. No org charts, no chief culture officers. Just results. She let me handpick my team. I didn't go after flashy resumes. I called people who had grit, folks who had been through the fire and came out smarter, not just louder. The first month we signed 2 major accounts, both of whom had cut ties with my former employer, quietly but deliberately. One of them said, "We're not following a brand. We're following you." Another, "We've been waiting for you to do something on your terms." Funny thing was, I hadn't even pitched them. They came to me. And the work? It felt clean again, purposeful. Meetings were short, strategy was sharp, and every win felt like it actually mattered. Not because it impressed shareholders, but because it solved a real problem. I started mentoring younger consultants too. Not with performance reviews or KPI dashboards, with real talks. I told them what no one told me. Your value isn't in the title, it's in the trust. Build that, and no one can fire you from it. One of the new hires, a brilliant woman named Harper, asked me during our first one-on-one, "What made you stay in this field for so long, even when it didn't value you?" I thought for a second, then answered, "Because I wasn't building a career. I was building a reputation. Careers can be cut short. Reputations follow you." And they had. Quietly, faithfully, like echoes that finally found their way back. We didn't need to shout about what we were doing. Word spread fast. Referrals came. Former colleagues reached out asking for guidance. Even clients I hadn't worked with in years called saying they heard I was back, and this time not behind anyone's logo. And the best part? There was no revenge speech, no grand declaration. I didn't have to say anything. I just showed up, did the work, built something durable, and let them see, from the sidelines, what happens when you bet against someone who never needed permission to lead. It was late on a Tuesday when Melissa walked into my office holding a folder that didn't look like the usual pitch decks or client updates. She placed it on the desk and said, "They want to merge." I didn't say anything at first. She kept going. "They're bleeding talent, revenues tanked, the board forced out most of the exec team. Their new strategy? Extend a hand, to you." I flipped open the folder. It wasn't just a merger proposal. It was an invitation to lead the integration. They wanted me to return, not as a consultant, as the architect of a full rebuild. They were offering the very authority they once denied me, back when I was too traditional. I leaned back in my chair. The irony didn't escape me. But I wasn't angry. That part of me had gone quiet a long time ago, because power without clarity is just noise. And I'd learned to live without both their noise and their validation. I didn't reject it immediately. I read every page, carefully, annotated the weak spots, assessed what this meant, not for my ego, but for the people this would impact, the teams, the clients, the future. When I called them back, I laid out my terms. No vanity hires, no boardroom, politics, total autonomy over people, process, and culture. I would lead, yes, but I wasn't saving anything. I was building from scratch. And if they wanted to rebuild, they'd have to trust someone who never needed their permission to begin with. There was silence on the other end of the call, followed by a quiet, "Understood." I didn't tell anyone right away, not because I was hiding it, but because I'd learned something far more valuable than influence: patience. Leadership isn't about coming back with fire, it's about walking back in, with precision. What they offered wasn't a reward. It was a recognition, delayed, reluctant, but real. And I accepted it not for status, but because I knew I could set the standard they never thought they needed, until it was too late. Same glass facade, same flickering light in the second-floor hallway. Even the front desk receptionist, Lana, was still there, though she looked up at me like she was seeing a ghost. I smiled. "Hey, Lana." She blinked. "You're back?" I nodded casually. "Just for a bit. I'll be upstairs." No security badge this time, no cardboard box in hand, just a laptop bag and a quiet presence. When the elevator doors opened on the 5th floor, the energy shifted. Conversations paused. Eyes darted toward me, then quickly away, like they weren't sure whether to say hello or apologize. But I wasn't here for apologies. I passed the corner office where they'd once pushed me out with a forced smile and a typed script. The nameplate was gone now, vacant, symbolic. The conference room at the end of the hall had already been prepped, my new title printed neatly on the meeting schedule: Executive Director of Strategic Integration. But the label didn't matter. What mattered was who was waiting inside, not the executives, not the board, the team, people who stayed, people who left and came back, people who remembered. They didn't clap when I walked in. They didn't have to. The silence carried something heavier than applause. Respect. I pulled out my notes, took a breath and said, "We're not rebuilding what failed. We're redesigning what should have existed all along, and we're doing it together. No revenge speech, no triumphant posturing, just focus, presence, clarity, because real victory doesn't need a spotlight. It walks in through the front door and gets to work." I never wanted a statue or a wing with my name on it. That was never the goal. But one afternoon, after a mentoring session with some of our new hires, I walked past the training room and saw something on the whiteboard. "Ask Lyle before you automate it." I chuckled. Turns out legacy isn't in titles. It's in habits, in stories retold after you leave the room, in the way someone pauses before making a decision, because of something you once said in passing. These days, I spend most of my time teaching, not just the how, but the why. Why trust still beats trends. Why relationships matter more than reach. Why silence sometimes is the loudest message you can send. And every time one of them closes a deal with integrity, or defends a client against pressure, or walks away from something easy in favor of what's right, that's the legacy, not what I built, but who I helped build. Turns out, you don't need to shout to prove your worth. Real value doesn't beg to be seen, it just survives the storm, and when the dust settles, it's still standing, quiet, solid, unmistakable.